What's up guys, my name is Brandon. Welcome to Quick Flicks. Today we are continuing the Cornetto trilogy with the blue ice cream flavor Hot Fuzz. Directed by Edgar Wright, releasing in 2007. Fun fact, the 15-year anniversary of Hot Fuzz is in just a few days on March 14th, 2022. My local theater is actually showing it in celebration, and I'm definitely going to be swinging by to watch this crazy action whodunit parody, and bonus points to anyone who can predict who they think the killer is. Anyway, I'll stop rambling. Let's go ahead and hop into the movie. Police Constable Nicholas Angel, born and schooled in London, received 9 special accommodations in the last 12 months, and is easily better than the other nitwits in the police academy. We pick up as the elite officer is promoted, however, it's out in the country, in Sandford, Gloucestershire. I hope I said that right. He's happily sent away by his sergeant, inspector, chief inspector, played by Bill Nye, who actually played Sean's dad, Philip, in Shaun of the Dead. This is a good time to mention. This will be a reoccurring thing, as Edgar Wright loves to cast the same actors throughout the entire Cornetto trilogy, and the entire precinct, who's tired of Angel making them look bad. After the heartbreaking news, Nicholas tells his ex-girlfriend, Janine, during a bloody crime scene. She goes on to tell him that she's already moved on, due to how selfish he is, and that he only cares about his job, never knowing how to just switch off. After a brief montage of Nicholas making the move with his Japanese peace lily and arriving at his apartment, he decides to wind down with some sweet cranberry juice at the pub. But the new police officer of Sandford notices a bunch of teens illegally drinking and upholds the law, much to the dismay of the pub owners, Roy and Mary. Once Nicholas unofficially does his job, he leaves, meeting a drunk named Danny, who is attempting to get in his vehicle. Nicholas, of course, doing his duty. He turns to read a plaque on the fountain when Danny accidentally almost runs him over. This prompts Nicholas to take Danny and a few teenagers that he finds along the way down to the station. Nicholas, a man who never forgets his pen, fills out the paperwork, and we get a fun little montage of the police officer booking the drunks. The next morning, the community of Sandford is greeting Nicholas left, right, and center when he eventually meets Simon Skinner, a man who loves his killer puns.
You're a what? A slasher of prices. Just kidding. I'm Simon Skinner. I run the local supermarché.
The new police officer gets to the station and finds out that Danny has been released from his cell. Luckily, that mystery is solved quite quickly when Danny pops up behind him and breaks the tragic news that he's also a police officer. Nicholas soon gets acquainted with Chief Inspector Frank, who's Danny's dad. He gives Nicholas a tour of the entire station, which seems a bit dusty and empty. Frank then introduces him to the entire staff, who just seem a tad lazy, and Saxon, a police dog who isn't really a police dog because he's just too darn friendly. Nicholas also meets Tom, the neighborhood watchman, who admires Angel's work and has some serious beef with the living statue around town. After a hard day's work of eating chocolate cake, the crew and Nicholas go to the local pub to celebrate. Nicholas gets a chance to know everybody, but he doesn't really seem amused by the silly and aloof antics of his fellow police officers. Fast forward to the end of the day, where Nicholas meets various town members of the NWA.
Straight out of Compton, crazy motherfucker named Ice Cube.
No, not them, you silly. The Neighborhood Watch Alliance. They essentially just sit around a big table and gossip about the townspeople. The next few days of Nicholas's shift revolves around him speaking to a classroom about police work and attempting to capture a dastardly swan who's escaped Mr. Peter Staker's castle. Danny and Nicholas put in a hard day's work trying to catch that feisty swan. But no luck. After Danny and Nicholas discuss a few suspicious characters around town, the duo go to a local shop, where Nicholas catches a shoplifter in the act. A high-octane chase follows, with Nicholas meeting a crossroads when he sees Mr. Staker's swan casually waddling about. He makes the difficult decision to chase after the shoplifter, taking a shortcut through the gardens. The shortcut works out as they finally capture the man thanks to a can of spray paint. Once Auntie Jackie's sister's brother's boy, aka Mr. Heck Ugly, is identified, he's sent down to the precinct immediately. Though Mr. Skinner opts not to press any charges, baffling Nicholas. He voices his concerns with Frank, who says he'll make sure justice is served. Later into the day, after a brief discussion about car chases and firing your gun into the air and going "aw,"
Have you ever fired your gun up in the air and gone, ah?
No, I have not ever fired my gun up in the air and gone, ah.
a speedster passes the two officers up. Nicholas stops Martin Blower and his mistress for speeding. The wannabe actor apologizes for his mistake and makes up for it by leaving a pair of tickets to his Romeo and Juliet play down at the precinct. Rightfully, Nicholas rips up the tickets as he sees it as a bribe, but
If you wouldn't mind representing us at the Amdrams tonight.
unfortunate. After sitting through 3 hours of so-called acting, Danny and Nicholas hit the local pub, where everyone from the play also seems to be. While conversing around, Simon Skinner creepily, yet playfully, threatens Mr. Blower's mistress.
I'm sure if we bashed your head in, all sorts of secrets would come tumbling out.
Nicholas obviously taking note of this. Later into the night, an unknown knock happens at Martin's dressing room door. The safest town in the village is safe no more, as a black cloaked figure goes acts crazy on him as his mistress screams in horror. Early in the morning, their decapitated heads are found on the side of the road, with the cause of death being labeled as an accident. Mr. Skinner creepily shows up again, and Nicholas is suspicious of the local supermarket manager. Danny and Nicholas express their concerns that the collision was no accident, but it falls deaf on the ears to the Andes and Chief Inspector Frank. While Nicholas is voicing his concerns on the potential that this was no accident, Frank decides to get his mind off of it by giving him a complaint on Mr. Webley chopping down his neighbor's hedges. The crew arrives, questioning him on the matter, and if he has a license to carry the firearm. He informs them he does for this specific one. This leads to the discovery of an entire arsenal and a sea mine in the shed. After a hilarious bomb scare, the weapons are confiscated and brought into the precinct. To celebrate, Danny suggests hitting the pub. This specific scene was actually quite challenging for actors Simon Pegg and Nick Frost. You know, being best friends and all, it's tough to be serious. The dudes just couldn't keep it together. And honestly, it's hilarious.
That was quite an impressive haul today, Constable Butterman.
Yeah, maybe we should do something to celebrate.
What have you got in mind?
I don't know.
What did you have in mind?
I don't know.
The guys go to the pub, but after questioning the Andes regarding the Martin Blower case, Nicholas switches back to police mode and gets to work on the case himself. However, Danny asks what made Nicholas want to become a policeman officer, and the two bond by sharing their desire to protect the law. The guys go on a drinking binge until Skinner shows up and drops more hints that he's hiding something concerning Nicholas. Frank comes in right after, demanding Danny and Nicholas take home a drunk patron, George Merchant. After dropping him off to his mansion, the guys head to Danny's apartment and watch Point Break and Bad Boys 2 as the black cloaked figure strikes again by killing George. The killer hides their tracks by blowing the place up. The next morning, their plan actually works, and the crime is dismissed as another accident. But this time they're saying it's due to George being inebriated and the high pressure of his stove while trying to supposedly cook beans. Mr. Skinner weirdly drives by the crime scene, Nicholas once again taking note of his odd behavior. The Andes then mock Nicholas and Danny for not writing off murder as a possibility. Nicholas tries to prove him wrong, but unfortunately, the surveillance tape only caught the most wanted criminal in Sandford, Mr. Staker Swan. At the local fair, journalist and reporter Tim Messenger urgently tells Nicholas that they need to talk as soon as possible. Angel is tasked to do a lottery raffle as Messenger waits for the police officer. In the meantime, the black cloaked figure appears once again and rushes on top of the church building to push over a sharp pillar, turning Messenger's head into juice. As Nicholas gets there in time and watches in horror. As you can suspect by now, this murder is deemed an accident. Nicholas calls it a murder, and Frank takes it seriously this time, assigning everybody to do a special task to get more clues regarding the bloody crime. Once again, the officers fail to find any evidence, and Nicholas and Danny have a falling out over Danny wanting to give up on the case. During that time, Nicholas amps up his investigation on the murder victims and eventually apologizes to Danny and gets him to join in. The two discuss all the murder cases in a lengthy montage, but they run into a wall and Danny comes to the conclusion that they were all indeed accidents. Suddenly, there's a fire in the police station. It's Danny's birthday. Nicholas, feeling bad for not knowing, leaves and heads over to Miss Tiller for a Japanese peace lily to give him. he notices that she's having a big sell and questions if she's going anywhere, in which Miss Tiller confirms that she's leaving Sandford. The nice lady also spills a ton of secrets regarding the dead victims. Nicholas leaves the shop for a quick second to grab a notebook to write down the details, but that gives the black cloaked figure enough time to murder Mrs. Tiller with garden shears. Nicholas demands that the figure stop, but the serial killer runs off and Nicholas chases after him. We get a thrilling chase scene that results in the black cloaked figure injuring himself, but managing to still get away due to their incredible speed. Nicholas officially declares all of the accidents as murders, and the team gives him a hard time again, not believing him. There's a back and forth between Andy and Nicholas, involving a few naughty words and some bold accusations. Nicholas is called into Frank's office, and he explains why the notion of murder is crazy, noting that there hasn't been a single recorded murder in Sandford for the last 20 years. Nicholas disregards that and claims to know who the mysterious killer is. Nicholas and the team charge over to the supermarket to arrest Simon Skinner for the grisly murders. Nicholas explains how and why Simon would kill each and every one of the victims. However, Skinner isn't fazed by any of Nicholas's theories or accusations. Nicholas feels quite confident though, just needing the cherry on top to place him at the scene of the crime. He checks for the supposed to be wound on Skinner's legs, but the manager is injury-free. Skinner's innocence of Miss Tiller's crime is further proven through documented proof of the manager being at the store during the time of the crime. Nicholas is caught in a slump at this point over his failure to find the killer, until Miss Roper questions Danny about finding the killers. This sparks an idea that there's more than one murderer in the town, and Nicholas demands Danny to get back to the station immediately. Nicholas expresses the thought to Frank, but he discredits the theory and sends Nicholas home for the day. However, the black cloaked figure is waiting for the police officer back at his apartment. Nicholas and the killer fight in the apartment when Nicholas pulls off the hood, revealing that it's Michael, an employee at Simon Skinner's market. Michael gets the upper hand, but the doofus gets distracted by Nicholas's prize monkey. The officer then clocks Mikey in the head with his Japanese peace lily. Skinner's voice calls for Michael to respond from a walkie-talkie. Nicholas yarps his way to the manager's whereabouts.
Sergeant Angel's been taken care of. Yarp.
He follows the lead to a local castle and witnesses a secret meeting, revealing that the entirety of the Neighborhood Watch Alliance are in on the murders. Nicholas confronts them, and they explain their reasoning for the heinous crimes. Their reasoning is much simpler than Nicholas had previously thought. Essentially, they just killed anybody who annoyed them or made Sandford look bad in any way. Nicholas chastises them for the murders and their motives, until Chief Inspector Frank reveals himself as the head of the table. He explains his motive, being that he strongly desires to keep Sandford the perfect community after his wife's untimely and shocking death, who dedicated her life to making Sandford perfect. But Nicholas doesn't care and demands everyone come with him, as they are now arrested. They of course refuse, Danny and Michael then grabbing Nicholas. But the police officer gets a hold of Danny and threatens to cut his head off. Inspector Frank calls him on his bluff, and Nicholas runs away. They chase after him, but he falls down into a cave tunnel thing of some sort, and to his horror, Nicholas comes across various bodies, including the underage youngsters from the pub and the annoying living statue. He escapes the cave, but ends up surrounded by the NWA, and shockingly, Danny walks up and stabs Nicholas, killing him. Danny then drives his corpse to an abandoned road, opening the trunk, and yeah, I was just having a goof with you. Danny was just saving him from the situation. Danny confirms that he knew about the group, but he didn't know anything about the murders. He refuses to do anything about his father's misdeeds, because you know, it's his dad, but he hands Nicholas his car keys to go back to London. Feeling hopeless, Nicholas takes the opportunity to leave. He stops by a gas station, finding the motivation to take down the NWA from a copy of Point Break and Bad Boys 2. He then buys a couple of necessities for the pending war. The next morning, James is enjoying another beautiful day in Sandford when Nicholas runs into his vehicle, then knocking him out. Luckily, his mom is a stormtrooper, and this goes how you would expect. After detaining the two, he heads to the precinct and into the weapon room to stock up for the biggest fight of his life. He then rides into town on a horse, much to the chagrin of the NWA. Mr. Treacher starts off the gunfight, everyone else in the NWA then joining in. The wild battle sees gunshots left, right, and center, swords coming close to decapitating Nicholas, lots of people getting wounded, and Danny popping out of his patrol car, aiding Nicholas in the war of good versus evil. After taking out Roy with a clean shot to a bear trap and Mary inside of the pub, Frank and the officers confront Danny and Nicholas. The two outlaws convince the Andes and the crew that they've been brainwashed by Frank and the NWA. They finally start believing him and join forces with them, but Frank makes a daring escape before he can be arrested. The officers then set their sights on the supermarket. Bob comes up with a brilliant plan to ambush the store, then rushing inside, while Nicholas gets sidetracked fighting Michael again. A wild gunfight ensues between the butchers and the officers. Seems like they may need some assistance. Luckily, Nicholas is able to finally knock the brute out cold and aid his fellow officers in the war against the butchers. They outsmart the meat slicers via shopping carts and win the war. They aren't finished yet though.
Nice one, Doris.
Nothing like a bit of girl on girl.
Never mind. They think the coast is clear until it rains pineapples. The officers claim they can handle the rest of the supermarket staff, allowing Danny and Nicholas to run off and catch the big fish. However, Frank and Simon are already driving off, but Nicholas and Danny follow pursuit. After some car chase gunfighting, the most wanted criminal in Sandford, Mr. Staker Swan, causes Frank to swerve off the road and fly over a miniature Sandford, then crashing. Danny and Nicholas finally manage to capture the dangerous culprit and put the Swan into the back seat. They catch up to the wreckage when Simon tries running off, but Nicholas follows him. However, Simon grabs the kid that's working on the miniature Sandford and threatens to blow his head off. The kid bites him in response, allowing Nicholas to strike. They get into a bit of a scuffle. Simon's got some moves and almost kills the officer, but Nicholas rebounds and knocks him for a loop. Nicholas goes to thank the kid, but the killer always comes back for one last scare. However, he slips on a model car and impales his jaw with the model pillar. This battle of evil versus good isn't over just yet though, as Frank threatens to shoot Danny. Danny easily escapes though. Snatching the gun away from his father, he has an opportunity to shoot Frank, but he simply can't pull himself to do it, so he just does a point break. Just when it seems that Frank is going to get away in the police car, the Swan attacks him, causing Frank to crash into a tree, and the battle is finally over. The media and London police have arrived to cover the situation. Nicholas's former chief inspector and supporting cast ask him to come back due to the lack of arrests their department has made, but he found his new home here in Sandford and declines. The next day, the officers have quite the paperwork to fill out for all of the arrests made. Everything is all fine and dandy until a forgotten NWA member, Tom, comes into the room. He tries to shoot Nicholas with a musket, but Danny takes the blast, and Nicholas chases after him, but Tom accidentally stumbles into the weapons room and activates the sea mine. The police station blows up, and Danny seemingly is on his deathbed. Aww. Sad. 1 year later, Nicholas brings flowers to a grave, and it seems that Danny's death is confirmed. However, it's actually for his mother, as Danny is alive and well. The boys get into their patrol car, and Doris radios in a new assignment, which sees them gear up for their next mission, and the movie ends. Let me know what you thought of Hot Fuzz. Did you like it? Hate it? Was it better than Shaun of the Dead? Or did you like Shaun of the Dead a little bit more? Next week, we're gonna be covering the green ice cream flavor to conclude the trilogy, The World's End. Until then, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.